Uh, where did I grow up? I'm not sure I've grown up yet. But I was born in Minnesota, but my family quickly moved, probably because it's so freaking cold up there. We grew up when I was a really little kid. When I first listened to the Beatles and saw them on Ed Sullivan, I was living in North Carolina. But then I moved to South Georgia when I was still in elementary school, and then I grew up mostly in Selma for a couple years, and then Auburn, Alabama. So I'm a Southern boy by nature. So that's probably where I learned how to play slide guitar, and a lot of my influences from I never got into a lot of the Southern bands, but I was definitely the early Allman Brothers were a big influence on me, and I saw them live, and then Little Feat, who I thought was a Southern band, which turns out they weren't Southern, but those are my early influences. But I grew up in Alabama. I was there, went to high school there, and then I played in top 40 bands around the Southeast for about another 10 years after high school. Went to Berklee for a short amount of time, and then I went to MI Musicians Institute in 1985. Back in the '70s, I was starting to get into some fusion stuff, and I had a good enough ear to figure out some chords and some licks, but I really didn't know what they were thinking. So I kind of wanted to know a little bit of theory, a little bit more, and I wanted to, you know, I was really curious, and I saved up some money and borrowed a lot of money. I went to Berklee for 1 quarter, and that's when the money ran out. But I had a great time. I learned basic theory there, and I was introduced to a lot of really great players. I mean, I heard Pat Metheny and Lee Ritenour for the first time when I was at school there. So then I went back to Alabama and we formed a couple fusion bands and we did stuff from Chick Corea to Hermeto Pascal, uh, Brazilian music, jazz music, as well as we were playing Rufus songs and Chaka Khan. So, but Berklee kind of gave me a little insight into music theory, or gave me a little taste of it at least, and it also gave me a introduction to a lot of European players who were there. So I got to hang out with a lot of guys from France and that otherwise wouldn't have ever met in Alabama, which kind of turned my head around in a lot of ways too. Yeah, in 19, I guess it was 1984, they had a competition in Guitar Player magazine. It was called the Larry Carlton Scholarship, and it was a competition. You sent in a cassette tape and the sob story on why you deserved to have the scholarship more than anybody else, and I won it. And I guess Larry Carlton supposedly picked my tape, which is very cool. So I got, at the time, MI was a real prestigious school to go to, or it was called GIT, and it was kind of a select group. There was a smaller, there's only about 100 of us there, and I came out in '85 on the scholarship. Everything was kind of paid for. And once again, I borrowed money to live and worked at a hotel and did whatever I could to get by. But the cool thing about the school then is you'd walk down the hallway and there'd be Robben Ford and Joe Pass and Jeff Berlin and Billy Sheehan and Scott Henderson and Frank Gambale. I mean, the hallway would just go on forever with these great players on either side. So I was not a very good student. I skipped a lot of my classes because I did know some theory from Berklee, and I thought I knew everything at the time. I think, and I just went to open counseling. After open counseling, and sat and played with my heroes, basically. So that's why I came out, and then after that, shortly after that, I started getting some tours. I went on auditions and got a lot of them, and just been working ever since. Actually, when I got out of school, I was working at a hotel to make ends meet. At the Magic Hotel in Hollywood, and they used to have these little grievance meetings where Howard Roberts and Tommy Tedesco, who were two of the founders and great guitar players themselves, would come in and they would listen to the students' complaints or suggestions. And I was in there one day, and a couple students said that there's this guy Allen Hinds who they thought should be teaching at the school. And I was totally flattered. I couldn't believe they were even saying that. And then Tommy Tedesco says, "Who's this Allen Hinds guy?" So I stood up and he goes, "Get him a job." So they got me a job the next week, and I started teaching there, and I've been there ever since. Luckily, I guess I'm kind of a resident artist in residence, only because I've had a chance to tour with so many people over the years. They kind of use me mostly for open counseling. I'm probably best at one-on-one or sitting with a group of students and listening to each of them play and critiquing them. That's probably what I do best because I can usually I've been there. I've been to all the different levels, so I'm pretty good at not shooting them down and making them feel terrible, but trying to see something good in what they're doing because it's one thing I've learned through the years that some students who you think are going to never amount to anything will surprise you. in the best ways. Sometimes they just go, oh my gosh, this guy writes great songs, or oh, this guy's got his own style now. People change, and so I always give everybody a shot in my open counseling. But I'm definitely very critical when I let them know what I think they're doing wrong or right. Well, the cool thing about MI when I was a student there is that, um, and I think as it was true with many schools and the way schools have changed over the years, back then it was a little bit more, it was a little harder to get into the school and it was a little harder to pass, I think. And there was so much pride. It seems like everybody there, we were all working on a mission to be the best player we possibly could. Um, as time has gone on, I think because of the economy and everything, more schools, not just MI, but schools around the world, let more students in just because they can afford the tuition. So, and the school's gotten so much bigger, plus the school's become a lot more commercial. So a lot of times it's not really so important to be the best guitar player you can be. Some students use that as a vehicle to write, or they end up becoming great producers. So MI still has a lot to offer. It's just maybe not focused in one small demographic like it used to be. So I would think if the school has changed, it's gotten bigger, yes, but it's only gotten broader. There's still some great teachers there at school. There's a lot of teachers there who are kind of unsung heroes of mine. Chaz Krasamsky is incredible. Dave Hill is great. Patik Desai. Scott Henderson is still there. Al Banam. There's like great players at MI still, and they often get overlooked because they're not household, famous guitar names, but they're great instructors. When I was a student there, it was more of an exclusive thing. I don't think there were so many schools around the world that really offered a degree where you could get a diploma in guitar. So it was very exclusive for that reason. Plus, back in that time, the LA rhythm sections, whether it was Toto rhythm section or the Larry Carltons of the world, were all here in California. They were all doing all the sessions that we all aspired to be as guitar players at the time. I mean, I grew up listening to Joni Mitchell and the Crusaders when I went through my jazz era, and that was all Larry Carlton. And he was out here, and I won a scholarship, so it was really an honor to come out. And it was really cool just to be in their presence, be able to go down the street and see them at the Baked Potato. And it's still that way to some extent, but there was something, because it was a smaller school, everybody knew everybody, and there was much more of a competition amongst students. And but if I think about it per capita, the percentage of students that came out of our classes around that time of GIT's history, it was quite high. I mean, we graduated some really great players: Jimmy Herring, Jeff Buckley, Scott Henderson. I'm trying to think of some other people who have gone on. Paul Gilbert, Jennifer Batten, a lot of great players. Frank Gambale. Well, things have changed. I mean, commercial music now is a lot different than it was. I grew up in the best era for guitars. I mean, I'm 56 years old, so when I grew up, graduating from high school on till the time I came to GIT, and after some time, every band on Top 40, it was all about the songs and the melodies and the lyrics, and there was always a great guitar solo, whether it was a Doobie Brothers song or a Joni Mitchell song or a Steely Dan song. There was always some interesting, really great guitar stuff going on. And nowadays in commercial music, I think the only place you hear great guitar solos are mostly with country music. That seems to be the only genre that features really blazing guitar solos anymore. So it's just different. I mean, now, emphasis is more on the emotion out of simple kind of genetically engineered chord progressions. But so it's different. Yeah, it's harder. I think it's harder. I feel sorry for some of my students who were really great students, because had they been around 20 years ago, they would have graduated and they would have had the gig with Jean-Luc Ponty, or they would have gotten the gig with, because there were so many fusion bands going on the road then. And now these guys don't really have anything to do. There's not as many tours that go out. And if they do, a lot of the bands these days are like, garage bands. They're like friends. They're all like from the same area, and and it's not really about anybody having good technique. It's about like a Nirvana type of approach, where it's a band creating emotion with, sometimes the rawest, wrong chords are the best, and sometimes it's great in its own way. It's just probably harder for players, and especially for me, being as old as I am, to get as many tour dates as I used to. But there's still a lot of people I aspire to play with, whether it's the Joni Mitchells or any blues band. Like I've always wanted to play with Steve Winwood and Stevie Wonder. and Cassandra Wilson. I've always wanted to play slide guitar behind, Derek trucks. Back him up in case he needs a stunt double.